Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Physiology Secrets podcast. We've got another guest on today and a pretty special one. As you can see, we're not at the office at Mulgrave. We're down here in Collingwood at Adaptive HP with Ken here. Great to have you on. Really good episode coming up in terms of talking about bike fitting, bike position, what's going on with a few other projects as well, including, if you guys have heard, of it, Sync.
Yes,
Ride Sync. Yeah, so doing things with componentry on the bike and really sort of nailing down position, comfort, aero, all these factors come in to improve athlete performance overall. So really excited about this episode. But first of all, do you want to just give us a quick rundown into one yourself, but then also what you do here as part of Adaptive, for those guys who don't know, but then how that sort of ties in with your new project with Ride Sync as well.
Yeah, so Adaptive Human Performance started, well, about 3 years ago now. We've been in this space in Collingwood. And really, I guess, what Adaptive Human Performance is, it's all about position optimization. So making, whether it's a road cyclist or a triathlete or any other cycling discipline, it's about making someone more comfortable on their bike. So improving comfort, improving performance, or maybe resolving some injury matter that they may have. And in terms of what that's developed into now, we struggle with time trial position optimization with accessing parts that really facilitate that end goal. So we saw a bit of a gap in the market about 12 months ago where we just really needed to make our own parts to get to that point. So that's where Sync Ergonomics has come from. And yeah, it's really, I guess, an integral component of what I do with my work, but now also a pretty integral component of what a lot of other service providers do with their work around the world. So yeah, it's pretty cool that it's evolved to something that, look, we saw the gap in the market, and obviously a lot of other people have seen that as well and have jumped on board with the Sync Ergonomics products. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, cool. So it's that nice balance of, I guess, your background in, we were sort of lucky enough to have a chat before over coffee and breakfast, but your background in sort of the clinical side of things of health sciences, but then mixing it with a bit of sports science and biomechanics and tying it together to get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess really, whatever product it is you're looking at, when it comes back to product ergonomics, that's understanding the clinical side of things or the health science side of things, but it's also understanding the performance elements as well. So yeah, really Sync Ergonomics takes all of my experience over the last 4+ years, as well as that background in sports science, health science, and just trying to make people go faster while being comfortable.
Yeah. All right, so you just want to talk to me about the importance of bike position for performance and health, I guess. That sort of manipulating an ability to produce a better outcome on the bike, but then being comfortable and not putting yourself at risk of injury. Maybe use the example of we were talking about before with the hip pathology in terms of how that sort of impacts an athlete and maybe what we're missing there.
Yeah, so look, I really think there's 3 components to that ultimate end goal. Number one, it's athlete physical condition. So that relates back to not only strength and function, but understanding underlying pathology as well, because often that can have a really significant impact on your cycling experience. Second to that, you've got basically the way the equipment is configured. So that's, I guess, what most people would think of as bike fitting. It's setting your saddle height, it's selecting your crank length, it's setting your cleats up, it's selecting your stem length, handlebar setup, and all that sort of stuff. But then the third element of that is the equipment that goes along with it. So often it's your equipment that limits your outcome. So ensuring that you've got the right seat on the bike, you've got your right crank length. You can't deny that has a huge impact on the end goal, for sure. So it's really blending those 3 together, making sure that athlete health and physical condition is there, making sure that everything is set up properly, and making sure you've got the right equipment on the bike in the first place.
Yeah. And then in terms of that example of the athlete with the hip issues, do you want to explain how that can be pretty simply rectified? You were sort of talking about before that you dealt with it for like not even a couple of minutes, and you'd already sort of understood exactly what needed to be changed, and it was a pretty easy fix.
Pretty simple fix, yeah. So I guess really when you hear someone describe their pain and dysfunction, or in this particular case, that was the underlying thing, was pain and dysfunction. And I guess not everyone comes in for a bike fit specifically in pain, but often it's a key motivating factor, and for this particular individual it was. I guess firstly there's a few things that run through your mind. Is it this? Is it that? Could it be something like this condition? And then when you start assessing that person, usually that would start with a physical assessment, and in this case that's looking at hip joint range of motion in a couple of key areas where we look at hip joint pathology. So yeah, really, number one, when you hear them describe their symptoms, that makes you question a whole heap of things. Number two, when you then do a physical assessment on that person, that either confirms or denies or leads you to ask other questions. And in this case, yeah, it was a pretty simple case of hip joint, pathology that you need a scan to really identify what it is that's blocking that movement. But in 5 minutes, you can tell pretty much straight away that it's not going to be stretching a muscle. It's not going to be something that you can change in terms of saddle height, saddle offset to fix that. The only way you could fix it would be either surgery or change of crank length to help address some of the symptoms of hip joint pathology.
Yeah, and that, I guess, probably hips are one of the bigger injury or pain points that you see. Would it be hips, lower backs?
Yeah, low back for sure. 7 times out of 10 it's low back. Yeah. And the rest of those it's either hip or knee.
Yeah. Does that make it reasonably easy to, when I say fix then, for most people, is it a similar adjustment that you then make, or do you see similar things with the guys who will come in with sort of lower back pain symptoms? Do you see similar things in what they've already been doing on the bike that might be causing that lower back pain?
Yeah, for sure. So usually with low back pain, the thing you get concerned about is the flexion of the spine. Yep. So I guess the term is flexion pattern low back pain would usually be the issue with cycling. And there's probably, you can think of an example yourself where you see someone on a bike and they're super hunched. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about spinal flexion. So it's usually that you get concerned about, and usually the fix for that is saddle choice. Back pain, probably the most common injury, or definitely the most common injury for a cyclist, and 9 times out of 10 you'd say that would be fixed by saddle choice and set up.
Yeah, cool. So not necessarily something changing too much, it's literally just saddle off, different saddle on that's going to rectify it.
Yep.
Yeah, right, interesting. Something for everyone to think about in terms of that saddle choice of being critical. It doesn't seem, from sort of my end, I probably wouldn't have even thought that could make such a big change in terms of that flexion. But
yeah, so I guess what you're talking about when you're talking saddle choice is I'm not suggesting that you could change from one saddle that lacked ergonomic characteristics to another saddle that lacked ergonomic characteristics and get a good result. I'm talking a very specific change of moving from a saddle that, say, for example, doesn't have a pressure relief channel to a saddle that does have a pressure relief channel, which basically facilitates anterior pelvic tilt, which reduces lumbar flexion.
Yeah.
Like that's hands down. If I could change one thing in the bike industry, it would be getting rid of any saddle that doesn't have an effective pressure relief channel. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's like, and if I could give any advice to anyone listening, it would be, if you're going to ride a bike, make sure it has a saddle with a cutout, and make sure your posture on the bike is good.
Yeah, cool.
Saddle choice is basically workplace ergonomics applied to the bike. Like you wouldn't tell someone that it's good to sit in front of a desk like this for 12 hours on end. You always try and encourage someone to sit with a neutral spine, and ultimately saddle choice on a bike is no different to that. It's just trying to achieve better posture on the bike.
Yeah, cool. No, an interesting point to think about, because a lot of people probably think I need to change what my bars are doing, my seat height, things like that. But something as simple as saddle choice can really make a big difference, which is interesting. And that probably does lead into the other side of things that you do, and we were talking about aero testing things before. Is getting aero just for the pro athlete?
No, absolutely not. So yeah, this one gets me every time I do a fit for 9 times out of 10 when I do a fit for a triathlete or usually a triathlete, because there's more of a focus on comfort. I reckon people would be pretty disappointed if they came to me and I charged them $480 for a bike fit and that was slower as an end result. Like I think everyone is aware that, or hopefully as an end result of my service, they're not uncomfortable on a TT bike. But a lot of people come in for a time trial fit knowing that comfort is a key thing. And 9 times out of 10 they'd be in pretty severe discomfort, and they'd know that resolving that is definitely a key outcome from the service. But I think what you also need to be mindful of, you haven't invested, let's just say $10,000 in a time trial bike and however many hours training to go slow. Yeah, you're making this investment because you want to go as fast as you can for the power you can produce. So absolutely not. Being aero on a bike, if you're a time trialist, that's the number one goal, is to be aero. That doesn't mean that comfort has to come as a cost to being aero, but that is the outcome, is being as aero as you can be. Going as fast as you can for the power you can produce. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And so in terms of, and that's probably the key takeaway from that is going as fast as you can for the power you can produce. Does that change based on what power you can produce though? In terms of, if you've got someone obviously at the elite end of the spectrum pushing pretty significant power, of course they're going to go fast.
Yep.
The more aero you make them. But if you've got someone who's, let's say, over the course of an Ironman event only able to hold 180 watts,
Yep.
they're going at 24, 25k an hour.
Yeah, that's.
Are they still going to significantly benefit from getting slightly more aero?
Yeah, look, they will, but obviously
not to the same extent.
Reward is so much less than someone that's riding at 300 watts for 180 clicks. Like, they are two very different things. But yeah, if you're investing in a time trial bike, and I guess that would be your threshold for where you really want to start focusing on those gains. If you're buying a time trial bike, it's because you're wanting to go as fast as you can for what you've got.
Yep.
And that would be the point where, you really want to start investing in position optimization and thinking about being aero. If you're riding a road bike and you're participating, you're doing the event for fun, do you need to spend, $1,500 on being aero and all the accessories that go with it? Absolutely not. Like if the goal is participation, just enjoy it. Enjoy it for what it is and don't focus too much on the things that cost a lot of money and a lot of time.
You probably then put the emphasis on get yourself into a comfortable position.
Just be comfortable.
Be comfortable
And enjoy it. It's going to be a long day out there if you're riding at 180 watts.
Absolutely. In terms of probably the back end to that, the conversation about aero, and this is maybe where you want to tie in what you do with Sync and the ideas behind the high hands position. I know what a lot of guys probably see on social media is all the time we see this high hands position that you talk about. Where did that come from, and how does that give an athlete an advantage in terms of comfort, aerodynamics?
So I guess where it comes from, ultimately that's our experience with aero testing. So for aero testing at Adaptive HP, we use the Alpha Mantis track aero system. And basically what that means is we get an athlete to ride around the velodrome. We gather a whole lot of data off the bike and we can convert that to a number for their CDA. So when we perform that service, ultimately what we're doing is we're trying to find the most aero position for the athlete to be in. And in the course of, I guess, from when we started providing that service, over 3 years ago now, every time we do it and every time we test, we notice that we get the hands up high and generally we can make someone more aero. The key question is, how do you actually make that sustainable? So that's where the idea of Sync Ergonomics really comes from, is making this position that we know is more aero, making that position sustainable. And I guess part of that sustainability is comfort as well. Ultimately, when we talk sustainability, we mean no slip in position. So if you've got this position, obviously, and that's your aero position, obviously you want to maintain that for as long as possible. So every time you slip from that, that's a slip in position. So, and presumably that's not comfortable as well, because you're not doing this for a reason. It's presumably you lack support and you physically can't hold that position, so it's not comfortable. This is more aero. The high hands position is more aero, and thanks to the equipment that we've developed, it's also comfortable as well.
Cool. So it's I guess most of the guys that you see, is there anyone who doesn't work for the high hand position, or is it a pretty sort of standardised? Most people are able to, I guess, maybe adapt to it, or it's a natural fit for the body that goes with that high hands position?
I'm yet to see someone that's less aero as a result of it. I've seen a couple of small athletes that are probably benefiting less from it than some of the larger athletes we work with. As a generalisation, it's definitely no less aero, and 7 times out of 10, it's a lot more aero. It's, I guess, to the point where you almost don't bother testing it anymore. It's not even one of those questions where you're like, is this going to be more aero for this athlete? It is going to be more aero. It's just a question of how much more aero. It's always more comfortable. So it's not like we're going to make this person more aero, but they're going to be less comfortable. They're going to be more aero, and they're going to be more comfortable. So it's a no-brainer. That you do it.
Is this something pretty widely known, particularly, and I guess just sort of scrolling through Instagram feeds the other day, having a look at some of the pro athletes, particularly in triathlon, we see quite varied positions in terms of what's going on. Is this high hands position, something that's reasonably sort of, I guess, either kept in a small tight circle or not many people sort of know about? I saw a picture of Sebastian Kinley the other day, dead flat bars. It was really sort of that traditional position, I guess. Is this something that more and more pros are going towards, or is it something that people just don't know about yet?
Definitely more and more pros are going towards having some kind of high hand position, whether it's, so I guess when we talk high hands position, we classify it as 100 mils of high gain from the centre of the arc up to the top of the extensions. So there's definitely a lot of pro athletes that are at that point or higher. In road cycling, where we're limited by obviously the UCI rules, there's a whole heap of variations below that 100 mils. It is something that's becoming a lot more common, but then I think you've got a lot of older athletes that obviously come from a more traditional background where they're not adopting those positions. So yeah, there's a real mix in there, but generally speaking, a lot more people are working towards it because it is a shitload more comfortable.
Yeah, cool. Anything else to add on Sync while you're at? You mentioned before there's a few new sort of things that might be coming to help out a few guys who may not be able to access some of the stuff just yet.
One of our big problems at the moment is compatibility. So definitely we're looking at ways that we can rectify some of the issues that we've got at the moment with bikes that we just can't mount our parts to. Ultimately, what we've worked on so far is equipment that gets that position. We know that equipment is not always the best solution. There's a more aero way that we can do it, and that's also what we're working on with the next release of products. So basically, maintaining that same position, maintaining the high hands position, but a more aero way of getting there. So yeah, we've got some cool stuff coming out probably later on this year, I think.
Yeah, cool. Interesting stuff. You have to keep an eye out. I'm sure we'll hear all about it when it does come out. We'll have to share it with everyone to see what is coming, because again, if it's going to make us even more comfortable, even more aero, but then even more applicable to what different types of bikes, like I said, potential limitations at the moment, it's obviously opening up to a lot more of us to be able to change our positions based on what equipment we've already currently got, rather than having to go out and buy another bike. And
the expense of buying a bike just to achieve a certain position is not always in reach for a lot of people, and nor should it be.
Yeah, cool. Quick question I did want to have, speaking of different bikes, what's your thoughts on the most aero bike currently? Because I reckon probably a lot of people are probably going to want to ask you that question in terms of you do a lot of aero testing. What bike are you seeing currently that is probably the most aero bike out there that you could get? Because I reckon there's a lot of debate on what there is.
Probably going to answer that question in the most roundabout way possible, but in terms of your breakdown of what's contributing to aero drag, right? So when you're riding above 30 k's an hour, 90% of resistance to forward motion is aero drag. So for anyone that's riding in time trial event, be it triathlon or something else, your 90% of what you're working against is aero drag. Of that, 70% is you on the bike, 30% is the bike. So it's basically the body that's the biggest factor in that aero drag. So yeah, bike's important, it's 30% of that equation, but what's more important about the bike is the way that it allows you to manipulate the position or the setup to get the athlete into a better position. So for me, it's not a question of what's the most aero bike, that's almost irrelevant, because the difference between, 3 brands, it might be a couple of watts or a handful of watts. That is so insignificant compared to how much gain you can get from achieving a much better position on the bike. So focus less on this brand new bike offers me 3 watts at 500 watts. Like, who cares? Just focus on getting the best quality position that you can on the bike, and you'll get so much more gain out of that than any one single piece.
Trying to pick the fastest bike on the market.
And then often the fastest bike on the market won't have an integrated hydration system or something like that. So for triathlon, where you're out there for, if it's full distance, 180 k's, you've got to have some kind of integrated hydration system on there that allows you to access fluid immediately and, readily in front of you. Like, if you're having to break your aero position to grab a bottle, that's wasted. That, 3 watts that this new frame has saved you has just disappeared 10 times over. So it's more about the quality of position, and it's more about the integration of all those necessities that just have to be there. yeah, look, there's certain brands on the market that I think work really well for achieving the best positions. I'm definitely not one to spruik any one particular brand, but yeah, frame geometry does differ between manufacturers, and I think that's a far more overwhelming concern than some marketed number of watts saved.
And that's, I guess that's definitely aligned with what we talk about a lot, is that your bike's going to get you so far, but by the sounds of it, at the end of the day, from your position, our position, whoever's on the bike and what they're doing on the bike, whether that be their physical conditioning, their position, is going to play the biggest significant role in what bike they actually have underneath.
100%.
You can put any bike underneath them if they're in a comfortable aerodynamic position and they've got the engine to be able to power it. You're 98% of the way there, they're going to get the results, absolutely. Yeah, so something to think about, because it always comes up in terms of what bike's the most aero and what's the fastest bike out there. It almost doesn't really matter. It's what you put on and what you get out of it is the
engine
main
driving
thing. Yeah. Cool. So I think we'll keep it there for this episode. We've covered a fair bit already. I'm sure there's plenty of questions to come out of this, and we may have to do a follow-up episode at some point to cover off some of the questions we do get, because there's a whole bunch of things we could talk about with different case studies and different things to do with componentry, position, aerodynamics, etc. But last thing that I want you to leave everyone with is, where can we follow all your stuff to keep up to date with what you're doing here in terms of adaptive, but then also what's to come with RideSync?
Yeah, so Instagram is obviously the main channel that I use. I'm pretty limited with time these days. So at Adaptive HP for Adaptive Human Performance, and at RideSync for Sync Ergonomics.
Yeah, and anyone who wants to check out or get more information on the bike fitting process for themselves, go through Instagram. Is that the best place to?
Yeah, Instagram or just the webpage, adaptivehp.com.
Yeah, perfect.
Has a bit of information on the services we provide, and usually, so for any one individual, what a bike fit involves is obviously, it's a pretty individual specific process, so often it's more a case of sending an email and working through what that service would involve for that particular person.
Yeah, cool. No, perfect. Thanks for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate you giving up a bit of time to have a chat about what you do and the importance of the bike fitting side of things in endurance sports, cycling, triathlon, etc. So really appreciate it, and hopefully everyone enjoyed this episode of the Physiology Secrets podcast. It's a really exciting one this week, so give it another listen and get in contact with Ken if you've got any questions about bike fitting or anything to do with RideSync. So other than that, we'll see you in the next episode.